Man, if this ever is legal, I'm opening up my own store. Welcome to Creative Ops, a podcast for creative people.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Creative Ops, a podcast for creative people. This time, I talked to somebody in the cannabis game. His name is Kornoelje, and he is the owner and general manager and founder of Pharmhouse Wellness, Grand Rapids, Michigan's only locally owned and operated dispensary. Now, it's far from the only dispensary, but it's the only one where all the money stays right here in town. Why is it the only one? Well, Casey has a amazing story that involves, as he calls it, quote, shithouse luck. It's a great story, and he's going to tell you all about the things that they have planned in the future, including growing their own cannabis, having some of maybe their own strains that you won't find at other places, and all that kind of cool stuff. And you'll see what kind of community stuff they get into. Part of the reason why I love this place so much is because you can see that they're giving back to the community. The area looks much nicer now that they're there. They're giving out food to people on the holidays. They're really community involved, and I dig it. That's what you get when you get local cannabis. So if you are ever in the Grand Rapids, Michigan area and you feel like smoking some cannabis or eating some cannabis or whatever some cannabis, check them out. Pharmhouse Wellness. They're at 831 Wealthy Street in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And you can also find these guys online on Facebook and on Instagram, both of them at Pharmhouse Wellness, and that's farm with a PH, Pharmhouse Wellness, at Pharmhouse Wellness on Facebook, at Pharmhouse Wellness on Instagram, and at www.pharmhousewellness.com. That's all in the show notes. You don't have to remember it right now. Let's just go ahead and get right to the interview because it was a really fun one, and I think you'll enjoy getting to know the man behind the cannabis. All right, folks, here's the interview with Kornoelje, owner, founder, general manager of Pharmhouse Wellness in Grand Rapids.
Of small business owners in our family. So my grandpa and his dad and my dad were all small business owners in different parts of the country, but a lot of years here in Grand Rapids. And for my earlier years, I was born in Alaska.
Pull that up just a little bit closer.
Yeah, no worries.
Half that distance you got. There you go.
Yeah. My earlier years, I was born in Alaska and grew up.
So you're actually from Alaska? As
yeah,
far as where you
there.
entered the world,
Yep.
yeah.
Kind of a mixed bag. You know, I was born there, and then our family had a commercial fishing boat where we fished for salmon.
Oh, okay.
And so that was a small business that, our family ran. And Alaska was one of the first states to decriminalize and make cannabis accessible to individuals. And I believe that was back in 96. So,
oh, wow.
The small village that we lived in, it's just very difficult to get stuff in and out of. People grew their own products, both from vegetables and then of course cannabis.
Yeah.
So some of the
I've heard even now, if you go to a dispensary there or even just a grocery store there, you're going to pay noticeably more than you would here in, like, say, a Midwestern city like Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Yeah, absolutely. The price of milk is more expensive, cigarettes, anything. I mean, it just costs money to ship it in or fly it in or whatever. So that was really the first time that I was exposed to cannabis, not really participating in it, but seeing it in some of the greenhouses and indoor grows in rural Alaska. And that was just kind of, just planted a little, subliminal seed in the back of my head. And
easy to get some, like, if you knew the right people, if you're from the area?
Yeah. I think that if you were of age and cool with the folks that were growing. You could get it. I was young at the time, so I wasn't, smoking or consuming it, but I definitely saw, some of the older people doing it and participating. And so, yeah, man, that was kind of, I guess, my first like exposure to cannabis. And then our family, we uprooted and we moved from the West Coast here to the Grand Rapids area. Pops got back into the family business, which was the funeral industry.
Oh.
And so those were interesting years.
There's kind of a macabre connection there between packing in fish and then you're packing in people.
Yeah, killing fish and then dealing with dead bodies. So a little, everything's on ice, man. Yeah. It is interesting, but Pops is just, he's a provider. He's always wanted to do whatever it takes to provide for the family, and I feel a lot of the same qualities myself. So yeah, our family uprooted and we came here to West Michigan, and my dad is from Ottawa Hills. He went to Ottawa Hills High School, and our family had a manufacturing plant down on Burton and Kalamazoo called Perfected Grave Vaults. And we manufactured the grave vaults that caskets go in. Oh, yeah, and then that grave vault goes into the grounds. And then they also did cremation work, for the funeral industry, cremation versus being buried. So
yeah, I used to rent a place that was only like a block or two away from where they actually did the cremations, and you'd always see when you saw the dark smoke, you're like, oh,
yep.
Rest in peace, bud.
Yep, you see some smoke rolling by, and there's one in the oven. But yeah, man. So I mean, that's kind of the rundown on the family. As an adolescent, I just, my brother was 3 years older than me. So I was in, I think I was in ninth grade, in the first summer of eighth grade or beginning of ninth grade. And he was a senior. I was a freshman. You always want to look up to you look up to your older brother. You always want to be cool like them. And he was going to the parties and was cool with all the jocks and all the different people.
We had a friend whose brother was, really cool. And he was like 4 or 5 years older than us. And we'd always look at his Guitar World and his High Times.
Yep. So he had access to it, when I was, when I was a young buck and I had gotten it from my brother. And that was the first time that I was, really started smoking pot and just kind of fell in love with it from there. And like you say, I mean, that was 1999, 2000 era, sometime around then. And the laws just weren't favorable at all for cannabis. We didn't get medical cannabis in Michigan, as you know, until 2008. So there was that period where
even then it was pretty limited. I drove like almost 30 minutes to a dispensary, and maybe every fifth time I'd go there, the guy's like, I got raided last night.
Yeah. Crazy. Yeah, and that was the beginning of the caregiver era. That wasn't really the beginning of the commercial framework in Michigan, which, didn't come until 2016, 2017.
Yeah, because there was that huge wave of dispensaries, especially downtown, which I think is why it pissed off so many politicians, where you just saw neon marijuana leaves in the windows of all these places, and they're like, all right, I don't think so. And then all of a sudden you just saw those places one by one just going away.
Yep. It really depended on the city that they were operating in, the local municipality, the district attorney, whoever was calling the shots in that area. And some cities were more prolific and were willing to accommodate those facilities like Lansing or Ann Arbor. And there was quite a little robust scene going on in those cities, but Grand Rapids was very much not that way. And it was prohibitive here, but going back to 2000 era, it was super prohibitive. And I mean, any little bit of pot could land you in a big amount of trouble. But I knew that that I loved it. I loved the plant and was always fascinated with growing cannabis. So kind of from the early years, I started to smoke it, but I realized that if I could buy a bag and chunk off a couple of quarters or eighths to my homies, then I could smoke for free.
Yeah.
And that was really the beginning, man. That was just trying to smoke my own and smoke cheap, smoke on the cheap. So I'd usually try to source an ounce or a half ounce or something, and then I had my friends that would buy eighths along the way, and at the end, if I did it all right, I'd have a free eighth or maybe make 20 or $50 off the deal. And and for a ninth grader, I was making it, I was doing it. So
that's a great introduction to business.
It was a little bit. I
mean, it wasn't above board at the time, but as far as the lessons you can learn from that, because that's essentially what business is: finding a place where you can get it, finding people that are willing to pay a certain amount for it, and then take the profit, right?
Yeah, for the amount of risk, I don't know that it's at the time it was probably the when you factor in the risk is for the reward, but it was just part of the culture, man. I mean, we were just I didn't really care. I was definitely a little bit naive, and so, that's how I kind of got started. And then from there, we'd find bag seed and different kind herb, along the way. And I started saying, okay, well, I can get an ounce from the plug or dude, maybe I can just grow this shit my own, So started to plant some bag seed of various different kind herb that we found along the way. And started to experiment with some outdoor plants. And
I was going to say, where did you get seeds from? Like, left over in a bag, or the guy that you bought them from was like, yeah, you're interested in seeds, here you go. Did you buy them out of like a High Times? Because I know they've been selling quote novelty seeds for a long time, right?
Yeah, I never really, we tried to do some mail order stuff from Mark Emery like back in the day, and just this like, Mark Emery's getting busted and he's out of Canada and getting extradited, and like it's just, we never even end up, you had to do a money order and send it to Canada and wait like 4 weeks and like be super paranoid. We never ended up getting any seeds. We just got screwed, from the deal. But for me, I just, we were smoking on different herb throughout those years, but a lot of it, was Mexican herb, stuff that came up in packs and, compressed brickweed, and that was full of seeds. The seeds weren't that viable or high potency, but some of the kind herb that we would get from time to time did have a stray seed or two. So that was really where I was able to find some decent seeds. And then sometimes, one of my brother's buddies would say, hey man, here's some good seeds, and throw these in the ground and see what happens. But it was right around 2000 that I did my first legit garden, I would say. And
at that time, did you read a lot? Were you watching videos? Like, what was your were you helping other people and kind of getting advice along the go from that, or a little bit of a mixed bag?
Yeah, it was whatever. I mean, these were like the AOL days, dial-up modem, internet stuff was super sketchy. I can't remember if it was.
Wait 20 minutes for a flowering tea recipe.
Yeah, you got your floppy disk, you're plugging it in there, trying to download recipes and stuff. And so I just pieced together information that I could get off the internet, a little bit of High Times magazine stuff that was out there. I think there were a couple grow Bibles or grow books, that were available at the time. And then just some knowledge that I had playing around in the family garden. My mom always had a really good green thumb, and she always had a vegetable garden and flower garden behind the house. And when I was younger, I would go back there and help her and just knew a couple things from that. So it was,
it really is a pretty good crossover. I've grown a little bit of my own, but I've grown cucumbers and tomatoes and a couple little fruits and stuff like that. And a lot of the principles apply. You feed it certain things when it's growing, you feed it certain things when it's flowering or fruiting, and
mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's growing. It takes a lot of love and compassion, and whether you're growing vegetables or cut flowers or cannabis, it's all the same principles apply. The environment may be different, the genetics may be different, but plant physiology is the same across different different cultivars. So yeah, man, but at that time it was kind of sketchy. Our outdoor plants were always getting found by somebody. It was like, there were helicopters. It was, we never were really that successful at outdoor crops. I remember some of the very first ones I had like a really heavily wooded patch behind our house, and I went and I constructed this, it was a 4x4 little thing out of wood, and I brought a tarp back there, and in the summer, every day I'd go out there at 7:00 in the morning and untarp it, and then at 7:00 at night I'd put the tarp back on, and got these little CO2 canisters that we would put in our either our BB guns or our paintball guns, and like I'd crack those and throw them in there, for a little bit of CO2 supplement. So it's super backwoods, super, super, guerrilla style or whatever, if you want to call it that. And it just didn't get much sunlight, and the buds were super sparse, and and there wasn't much to them. But it was a little introduction, it was really cool to see some plants come together and have some bud formation on them. But
it's one of those plants you don't even trim; you just take everything.
Yeah, and my buddies are all just stoked on it. We're all like, yeah, you got some free herb. We'd probably throw it in the microwave to dry it and just do all the wrong things. But yeah, so that was kind of like my very first intro to growing cannabis, and ended up like at that time there's a small grow store that was really underground. It's called Grow Code, and they still have a spot off Michigan Street now, but they were the first grow store in Grand Rapids, and they were on Wealthy Street, on the east side of Wealthy. It was like you had to drive around the back and like go downstairs, and you like wanted to go in somebody else's car and then get in another car and go home and just to get the grow supplies. But I ended up doing a couple 1,000-watt indoor grow, and that was one of the very first indoor gardens that we had, and grew more pot than we could figure out what to do with. So yeah, that was through high school. That was right around 2003 era. And
were you doing like more traditional, just kind of like watering potted plants? Did you have a hydroponic thing going on?
That first indoor was actually a flood and drain hydro system. So it was two 1,000-watt bulbs. I still remember it was split spectrum. We had a HPS and a metal halide over a flood and drain system. And, you have your reservoir underneath. It's got a pump. It floods the table. They were in Rockwool cubes. And yeah, for a beginner grower, looking back on it now, it was pretty complex, a little bit more complex than I probably would have, recommend somebody to start with. Rockwool is just, I think, one of the more difficult. It's more fine tuned, it's kind of like driving a race car versus driving a Ford Pinto or something,
Sure,
like
sure.
it's you can go off the rails pretty quick in Rockwool. So yeah, that was 2000 through 03. And then I took a break, man. I went to college. Did some traveling. And then ended up coming back to Grand Rapids.
What did you study in college?
Started with environmental science, and then I've always just been good at numbers. I kind of dabbled in accounting a little bit, and then so I had like a basic associate's degree. I was also studying, like I studied all types of stuff. It took me like 6 years to finish. So, what did it take me? Yeah, about 6 years to finish a 4-year degree. And but
Been there, by the way.
Yeah. Hospitality, School of Business Management too. Worked in resorts and realized that was a super tough go, and not a lot of money in it. So
It's funny though, because it seems like there's some things you could obviously draw from all of those now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I'm thankful.
Even though, I don't know, maybe did you have an idea? Because I know we've all been sitting around, passing a bowl around. And people,
Man, if this ever is legal, I'm opening up my own store.
but how many people actually did,
Yeah, no, for sure. I don't know that the shop Pharmhouse Wellness would have come to fruition had it not been for just the various different stepping stones that happen along the way. But with that, just in school and realizing that hospitality wasn't my jam and being good at numbers, it ended up, strangely enough, landing on finance, man. And finance and econ, it was a degree that I got. I had some basics from Western Washington where I was studying, and then I got into a pretty bad ski accident in 2007 and broke my back skiing. And
oh, geez.
Yeah, it was pretty gnarly.
You look like you're doing pretty well now, but at the time that must have been, oh God. So where along your back was the injury here, the main thing?
It's the T12 through the L4. So it's the bottom of your thoracic, a section through the fourth lumbar.
Can you say that in English or just point to it?
Yeah, the lower back, bro. The lower back. Yeah. Yep. The lower back. And it was a compression burst fracture, and I blew out my right orbital bone.
Oh.
Punctured a lung, broke some ribs. It was a really, really serious accident in the backcountry of Washington. And I was just laid up, man. They fused my vertebrae back together, and I was in a hospital in Seattle, and there was just no way I could take care of myself anymore. And my life in Western Washington came to an end, and my family's like, we just, you got to come home. So you got to come back to Michigan. And I did. And I came back in a full body brace, looking like, I don't know, whatever,
parent, just imagine getting a phone call, your kids all the way across the country, and they are fucked up.
Yeah, it was weird.
Ooh.
My mom had like this intuition, or, mother's intuition. And she actually called my cell phone when I was like in complete shock on the side of a hill, at Mount Baker ski area in Western Washington. And
oh yeah.
And my buddy
been out that way a little bit.
Yeah.
Not to ski, but
super pretty, really beautiful area. But anyway, so it was a life altering event, and it changed the trajectory of what I was doing. Came back to Grand Valley and finished up there with a degree in business and finance, and then ended up it's the height of the Great Recession in 2008, and just went to get a job, try to start paying the bills and pay off my loans and everything, and ended up going into banking and getting a job in banking. So it was
and was your now wife in the equation at the time for how much of this stuff, or did you guys meet like at school, after school?
No, we didn't meet during college. That was right. So 2008 was right around the time this, MMMP, Michigan Medical Marijuana Program, was enacted. And
so she met you post that terrible accident, which sounds like, we kind of glossed over it a little bit, but it sounds like that definitely changed your outlook and your perspective and maybe your drive a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. No, I was living very, carefree in Western Washington, didn't have a pot to piss in, was, but then got into a pretty serious accident, and it definitely, you realize you're not invincible anymore when you're young like that and you get into a serious accident.
Yeah, because you said, what, 20, 21, something like that?
I was 21. Yeah, I was 21 when I got in the ski accident in 2007. So rolled back here to West Michigan, realized that cannabis was legal in 2008 for caregiving and for medical marijuana. So immediately applied for a license to grow my own. And then that just kind of those old years came back into play of, okay, I grew some herb myself and
that whole process, sorry to cut you off again, but that whole process of being able to grow is pretty similar to what you go through now to be a patient, to be able to get medical. It's just a different set of forms and stuff that you got to fill out, or does somebody like come and like look at where you're growing and say, okay, you got to have this?
No, back then it was I think, a little bit more strict. You could definitely seek out different doctors or different license places, but because of my spinal fusion and all my medical records and all that stuff, I had no problem. I just went into the doctor and said, look, man, I got, chronic pain and chronic arthritis in my back. And he's, no problem. They wrote me a script and I sent it off to the state and became a patient myself. And then from there, it just kind of evolved. It evolved into I was growing my own herb, and then I'd put it out there. I'd share it with somebody and they say, oh, this is pretty good. Would you consider being my caregiver or whatever? And then I would sign them up to caregive for them, and grow herb for them. And within the caregiver program, you can have 5 patients plus yourself. So,
and that's 12 plants per patient, right?
Yep. 12 plants per patient. And then if you're a patient yourself, that's 72 plants. And
that's the law now.
That's currently the law, although they are looking at changing it. Yeah.
At one time it was 12 patients per caregiver, wasn't it?
No, I'm not familiar with that. I thought it was always 5 plus yourself.
Oh, okay.
Maybe you're just getting it mixed up with the plant count being 12,
maybe
12 per person, but you could do 72, and some people were stacking it with multiple 72s, but I always just did 72 and did that, did that from 2008 to 2020 when we opened the shop. So it was a stretch of about 10 plus years where I was growing ganja on the side. And then, at night I was growing ganja. And then in the morning I'd wake up and put on, khakis or a suit or whatever, depending on the period, and go in and work at a bank. That was, what I considered a grind. It was basically I was buying different houses and I'd set up a grow room, and then when it got too hot, I'd break it down and go buy another house or go rent another house and build another grow room. And then when I got too paranoid or felt like it was time to move, we'd buy a different place. And we did that over like 4 or 5 different grow houses from 2008 to 2000 and roughly 18, 19. And I just was like, dude, this is just wearing on me. I didn't think that was the future for me. So
yeah,
just started to really start to think serious about trying to make a change and do something different.
That jogged what I was going to say too, is even now, having been like more publicly vocal about my overall support for cannabis. I know people who are kind of like, hey man, you kind of need to chill on that. You don't want your kids, like parents, your kids' friends' parents to know, like,
yeah.
Just thinking about like, I was growing at night and then I was putting on khakis during the day. I wanted to ask you about that. Do you have any hangups as far as, I'm guessing probably not, as far as what you do, like how your kids' friends' parents are going to be like, oh, they're friends with the marijuana people or anything like that?
A little bit, man. I'm trying to shirk that, trying to brush that off.
Because Michigan, we definitely come from, like, if you listen to Tom Segura, he talks about like, we would risk getting murdered just because we heard like so-and-so knows a guy who can get you a really good bag.
Yeah. I just think the West Michigan's a pretty conservative area.
Yeah.
It's a pretty conservative region, and
even half the people that are like, don't tell anybody, but I smoke weed. Like,
oh yeah.
Let's just be adults about it, because everybody's drinking. You know what I mean?
For sure.
I'm not throwing shade on people who drink either. I'm just saying, I think drinking has a more bummer effect on the people that do it in public settings than people who eat or smoke or whatever.
Yeah. Yep. No doubt. It's just I think that people, a lot more people, like you say, consume it than you would imagine, and there is still some stigma on it, but I believe in cannabis. I love cannabis. I'm going to be.
You have a legit qualifying condition. I had somebody told me that my qualifying condition for a medical card wasn't legit, even though they're not a doctor, because I had an injury when I was stationed overseas in Iraq, and I didn't get blown up or shot or anything like that. It was just a repetitive use injury, and basically my ankle just kind of started giving out, and I started getting tendonitis in the back of my leg. I've rolled this ankle, I don't even know how many times. I've lost some muscle around the knee on this leg. My hips always, it's just,
sorry to hear that.
Chronic pain and inflammation. And they're like, that's kind of weak, man. It's for people that like broke their backs or people that have cancer. It's like, no, man, it's for people that don't want to live on ice bags and ibuprofen either. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no doubt. And I feel your pain, dude. And I've seen it. I mean, my wife has Crohn's disease, severe and chronic
that's another
Crohn's
one
disease.
that really helps.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It was through the, kind of getting back to her into the equation. It was through the medical caregiving system that I was introduced to my wife. And
oh, no kidding.
Yeah. I started to caregive for a gentleman in 2009. And
what's his name in social?
Really cool guy, though. Really cool guy. And he changed the course of my life by introducing me to his daughter, and that was, he was a cool guy. And he said, one time, I came through and he's like, would you be interested in coming around and meeting Megan, meeting my daughter? And so he kind of gave me the green light a little bit there. And dude was cool, pop and ended up becoming my father.
The question, were you good at growing cannabis? You must have been pretty good if the guy's like, dude, this is so good, I'm going to introduce you to my daughter.
Yup, exactly. He gave me the green light, and then we started dating, sometime around 2010, and we were married in 2015. So that was, but it was because of cannabis that in the caregiver program that I met her father, who, and then eventually met her, and we got married and now have 2 kids.
One brand new, by the way, which we talked about before the show, but he's got a little baby at home, so congratulations.
Yeah. Thanks, man. I appreciate that. Yeah, so it's cannabis works in mysterious ways, and I do think that it's had its hand in my life and in a couple different serendipitous turns, but that was certainly one of them. And then getting the break to open the shop was another big one. But without that background and that hustle, I think over those 10 years where I was, every little bit of money I could save, I squirreled it away and saved the bank money and invested in a 401k, which I later liquidated and took a huge penalty on. But it was all those things over a 10-year period, just under the radar, just slowly grinding and saving, that I built a little nest egg that was able to, take all that money, every last red cent of it, and put that down to start Pharmhouse Wellness. And so that's what I did
along the way, because I used to teach and I told people when I quit teaching, because like I told you, I had one too many kids and I was just like, this isn't going to work. I started telling people, well, I'm going to get into writing. I want to write a novel, and I kind of want to just see where that goes. And I had so many people that were just like, but you went to college, you got kids. You can't just do that. I'm like, I mean, I am.
Yeah.
And that parlayed into some paying writing work, which parlayed into getting my own podcast and talking to all kinds of cool people. So you got to just do you. But like, what was the initial reaction from like friends and family when you're like, I'm taking this money that's for my retirement and I'm putting it towards a cannabis shop?
I think that people were pretty I think that people were pretty supportive of it. I know that they
You didn't get any
sure? A little bit.
Sure?
Yeah,
You
for
sure
sure.
about that?
I mean a little bit. It's always questionable when you want to make a significant life move like that. But they realized that I wasn't super happy in my day job, and they also realized that the caregiving was established. I mean, I had been a caregiver for 10 years and had done it, what I think semi-successfully, to the point that I'd been able to save money and demonstrate that it was, a little cottage industry business. So it'd be one thing if it wasn't
that's coming from out of state. And if it sounds like I'm throwing shade, maybe I am a little bit, but there's these big companies that are all coming in from, a lot of them from Colorado, and kind of just bogging down the market with big, corporate weed, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, so
you're kind of the minority here, being a local guy, which is weird to think about from where we started.
It is, and it's because those barriers to entry are so high. And I think that a lot of the caregivers, and I got hell of love for all the caregivers out there, but a lot of them were buying brand new trucks and taking wonderful vacations and just burning through the cash that they made. And that's choices that I think people made along the way, but I went about it a little bit differently. I always deposited all the cash in the bank. I had a really good accountant. I always paid taxes. I always filed tax returns.
Did you have to seek somebody out who was specifically proficient in like cannabis accounting and banking? Because I know that that's just recently become like a pretty hot commodity, having a accountant who's well versed in all these things.
For sure. My accountant is a badass and one of my most trusted confidants. We've been together since 2009, right around the time that I started growing pot. I just right away was like, I got to figure out, what I need to do with this money. Do I report it? What do I do? And working at the bank, I was in commercial banking, and I knew that any business that came along, the bank, when they would go to look at their records, if you weren't paying taxes and if you weren't reporting profit, you had no leg to stand on when it came to asking for capital. And there was just that initial introduction to that basic concept of taxes, profit, and
which
financial
is probably where
reporting.
A lot of people feel like they're getting left out of what's happening now, because for years there were people who were existing completely black market, and you don't report black market income.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of people didn't, and that's okay too. But when it comes to when the state finally came around with the commercial framework and they said, okay, here's some pre-qualifications to get in, show us your tax returns, show us your bank statements, show us your caregiver records, show us. I had all that stuff. I did, and a lot of people did not. And then also
it's
show
a pain
us
in the ass, but I mean, it makes sense on their end too, because they don't want to get caught up in anything that could be considered, like class 1 illegal drug handlings or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly. A lot of people were just afraid to do it. They were afraid to go to the bank and deposit cash. They were afraid to pay taxes, and I don't know. I mean, I just did it because I thought that it was the right thing to do long term. And I'm in hindsight, I'm glad that I did. But so it was really that kind of framework, or that groundwork that allowed me to apply for the licensure system, and allowed me to get pre-qualified with the state, and then work to find a property in Grand Rapids. So yeah, it was just really a trip. At the time, I didn't really like paying Uncle Sam, on ganja sales that I was doing in my basement or in a barn. But in hindsight, I'm glad that I did. And it's fucked up because the cannabis industry is, you just get taxed 6 ways to Sunday. Even the shop now is like, dude, if I got enough for a bus pass home, I've done a good thing. Like it's 280E, which is the federal tax code, is just gnarly. It's absolutely gnarly, and it's more punitive to cannabis industry than any other industry on earth.
Is there still much of a hassle from law enforcement with, raids or just threats of raids or anything like that?
No, I mean, I don't, I keep it pretty low key as far as like my personal garden and my personal growing and everything. But with the facility and with the grow, I'm more worried about, just people robbing it, just being being susceptible.
Insurance is probably tricky too with stuff like this.
Insurance ain't going to do anything for you, man. Yeah. I've got all types of insurance, but they won't cover it. Or if they do, they're going to make it really, really difficult, and they're going to drag it out, and they're going to pay a fraction. And you're going to pay super high deductible. And it's really just a requirement to have it for the state. You got to have a ton of insurance. Mm-hmm. And so nobody's really benefiting from that except for the insurance agents. Sorry. Sorry to my insurance agent, I love you, but, that's the reality of it. So
and you're not the only voice in any industry that's says similar things.
I know, man. I gotta love hate with insurance, man. It's just it's a side thing, but yeah. So it's it's definitely been an interesting road, and unfortunately, kind of one of the comments that you were saying before we got started about a lot of the caregivers like myself that grew clandestine and in basements and in barns, they weren't able to get in. They weren't able to get into the licensure system for maybe some of the hurdles that I talked about before. And it's the bigger companies that were well organized, well funded, had operations in other states and previously established, that were able to come in and show the state, hey, I've done this before, and here's proof. And those are the people that unfortunately were awarded a lot of the licensure and were able to secure real estate, which is also, a whole separate subject, but one of the bigger challenges and barriers to entry, I think, to getting into the cannabis biz, for sure.
I came from a all medical background, and then the recreational boom was a whole other thing. But I know there's separate weed in a weed cannabis. Do you care what people call it? I mean, I've heard you call it a couple of things.
Yeah,
I know some people are like, I prefer
ganja.
if you call it cannabis because it gives it more legitimacy, and weed just sounds like something that stoners smoke.
Weed's cool with me.
Yeah. So there's a set aside amount of weed that's just for medical, and then a set aside amount that's just for recreational. And if you run out of rec, sorry, this is only for the medical people. What is the difference between the two outside of, one gets tagged this? Is it concentration, THC concentrations? Is it just the way, I don't know. How do you know what's going to be medical, what's going to be recreational?
The difference between med and rec is there's a couple differences, but one of them is that they originate from a totally licensed separate facility. So within the commercial framework, you have a medical license and then you have a recreational license. So if you apply for a medical facility, you can only either cultivate or process medical cannabis out of that facility. So that's one of the big differentiators. But then just from like a testing requirement standpoint, on the grow side, it's a lot more stringent as far as the TYM, the total yeast and mold thresholds. For medical cannabis is 10,000 CFU, or colony forming units, which is a measurement of the amount of mold and bacteria that's on cannabis. So 10,000 CFU, and that threshold is really, really low. In fact, I think they're trying to change that and get it bumped up. But
just because too many people are having a hard time meeting that.
Oh yeah, especially in the beginning, a lot of people had a lot of challenges getting past that.
Tight humidity controls and all those kinds of things.
Yeah, you got to work at different environmental controls and super clean environment, super clean genetics, all those things. But
yeah, I see pictures of some people. It almost looks like they're, going into a room with somebody who's got some terrible contagious disease. They're just suited out.
Yep. Tyvek suits and the whole nine, man. When you go in there, it's sterile environment. And so it makes sense. I mean, it makes sense if you are dealing with cannabis that goes to a medical patient who potentially, has cancer or other chronic illness, immunocompromised, you name it. You want that cannabis to be as clean as possible. You want it to have the least amount of mold and bacteria as possible. But I do feel it's a little bit double-sided, not to get too off track here. But there's certain amount of mold and fungi just in the air that we breathe, the strawberries that you had for breakfast or whatever, or just on the bread that you picked up at Meijer, so people are exposing themselves to yeast and mold in other ways. But when you put it on cannabis and you fire that cannabis, that combustion that occurs, I think is where they kind of drew the line. So anyway, that is one of the big differences. 10,000 CFU on the med side, 100,000 CFU on the rec side. So that rec flower can have 10 times as much
10 to 1,
yeast mold and bacteria on it and still pass testing and go to market versus medical.
There's some people have a feeling that the rec weed actually isn't as strong, which I think there are some states that say like rec weed can only be such a high concentration, THC concentration.
I think they do have that in other states. I'm not as well versed in other states. I think like Illinois is trying to implement something like that where there's a cap on the THC on the rec side. And so we see potent pot both on the med and rec side, but we don't have that kind of threshold in Michigan. That doesn't exist. The other big one that there's really two other big ones is on the edible side. The edibles can go up to 200 milligrams on the medical side, and then they're capped at 100 milligrams on the recreational side. So you just get higher dose, higher concentration edibles on the medical side.
Still, if somebody eats 100 milligrams,
it's a lot. It's a lot.
I wouldn't recommend it. I'd recommend starting at like 5 if you've never done it before. Because
Yeah.
I've seen people get too high off an edible, and they just like sit there like, oh my God, I think I'm going to throw up. No, I'm not. Yes, I am.
Yeah, low and slow, bro. Low and slow. You want to take it easy on
And
the
don't keep
edibles.
eating it until it kicks in either.
Give yourself an hour, at least an hour to absorb it and observe and see if you want to dive back in for some more. But
Yeah.
so 200 on the med side, 100 on the rec side. And then the other big one is the excise tax. So within Prop 1, the state designated a 10% excise tax. That's on top of the 6% Michigan sales tax. So every cannabis sale, has an all-in 16% tax on the rec side. That's not money that goes to Pharmhouse. That's money that goes to
The
Governor,
people who allow you to keep doing it.
Yeah, Governor Whitmer, and then it goes to the marijuana fund, and it gets siphoned down to the municipalities that participate. Some goes hopefully. Some goes
Here's
to
to hoping that the
schools.
government works efficiently.
Yep. Some goes to research and development. Some goes to law enforcement. But
Is some of that going back into like, I know I just read recently that there's what's it called, like the Higher Learning Center that's teaching people how to grow and get into the business side of things a little bit or something like that?
I think that's privately funded. I don't think that comes from the state. That's
Okay.
I don't quote me on that, but I think that's partnerships between different cannabis companies and that
'Cause I know that
institution.
the city of Grand Rapids is trying to form a nonprofit right now too,
Mhm.
but that's totally
Yeah.
separate type of thing.
Yeah, that's totally separate. But the city did get, in its very first year, $600,000. And then I'd love to see what that number is now. But I believe in January, just a month ago, they got their second remittance. And I would imagine it's, well in excess of $1 million, which, is not crazy money, but it's still,
But hey, if you don't think it's much, I'll take it.
Yeah, if you're gonna pave a road or do a sewer project or whatever, or just administer the program, it's not my business what they do with it. But that money does come from the excise tax that originates at the recreational counter. So those are the big differences between medical and recreational.
I know that I'd heard people in the industry saying, man, let's hope this doesn't go recreational. Let's just hope it doesn't go recreational, because their whole thing was then you're going to see way more companies from outside pushing out the people from the inside. And, I don't know that I can say that they do or they don't, but it does seem odd that there's one locally owned and operated dispensary in Grand Rapids, or at least at the time that you guys opened, you were the first. I don't know if you still are, but there's maybe one or two in Lansing. I think there's one in Saugatuck that has its own little grow attached to it. But I mean, as far as like really getting a true local experience, why is it so hard? I mean, you've already said that there a lot of people made bad decisions or made decisions that made them just ineligible, but even still, like there's local money going into lots of things. Why isn't more of it going into this?
It gets back to the framework, how they set up Prop 1 at the state level. So at the state level, cannabis is legal.
Yeah.
But locally, it's not legal everywhere that you go. So the state deferred down to the local municipality, the city, the village, the township, whatever. They said, okay, municipality, you decide. You decide if you want to have cannabis.
I like that idea of, sending the control downward instead of upward.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it makes sense to control it at the local level, but people are people, and people are stuck in ways of thought. And you see this in other states, California in particular.
Yeah, there's kind of a donut of just no dispensaries in the neighborhoods around Grand Rapids, although Grand Rapids is that hole where it's just boom.
So a ton of municipalities said, you know what, it's not for us, or we want to wait and see, or whatever. So you really have, I think it's like between 5 and 10% currently of municipalities in Michigan that actually opted into cannabis within their jurisdiction. So what you have is a small percentage of places that allow it for business. And when you have such a small amount of opportunities, it creates a tremendous amount of demand on a small supply of places to do business. And that gets into what I think is the other really big reason why a lot of local shops aren't in play, or a lot of caregivers didn't get in, is because the hunt for real estate is so fierce. If you have such a small amount of municipalities that are saying,
just
hey,
this place here that you've got, I don't know if it was on the website or a different interview you did, you said it was kind of like there was just this one little spot that met all the criteria of like, you weren't this close to a church or a school or whatever else, right?
Yeah, for sure. The city outlined sites that were potentially suitable, and that you had to be, and you could have been within certain feet of a school or a park or a playground or a substance abuse disorder, but you had to get a waiver. This particular site did not require that, and that ended up being to our benefit down the road as we went through the planning commission and the different licensing at the city level. But getting back to the real estate itself, I mean, when they came out in, I guess it would have been 2018, and they said, hey, here's the areas that are going to be quote unquote the green zone, it was just a mad rush. It was a complete mad rush. I mean, I had, like I said, a little nest egg. I was willing to gamble on it, but I mean, stuff people were asking $50,000, $100,000 sight unseen, non-refundable deposits just to put a deposit down on a property that was going for 5 times its market value. I mean, you could have a strip mall like
people that are gonna throw
yeah,
down
you could have, like, I remember looking at some of the properties on Plainfield that like normally would trade at $300,000-$400,000 for a strip mall space. They want $1.5-2 million for this property, and it's like it wasn't realistic. It was hyper inflated, and it all traced back to the exorbitant demand that was on for such a small amount of supply of property. So Pharmhouse, in our property was just kind of shithouse luck and determination. A few people had passed me up along the way, and it was down to the 11th hour on trying to secure a property, because you had to bring a property to the city in order to move forward with licensure. You had to have a property under contract.
Yeah, you want to have all your ducks in a row dealing any kind of city government, because they're have it all ready, or it might be weeks, months before we'll give you this opportunity even again.
Yeah. They want to see that you're serious. They want to see that you had the wherewithal to actually put a property under contract. And so for me, it was really the only way was to get a little bit creative. And so I ended up going door knocking down this stretch of West Wealthy, and there were four houses that are within the commercial, this area's zone commercial, but they're residential structures. People are living in the homes, and it's because of the zoning, the evolution in zoning, where the city said, hey, this area is more industrial, but before it was worker housing stock. This was where this was where very blue collar workers in the early days of Grand Rapids were living and housed
back from the furniture manufacturing shops. And
yep, exactly. And so I just went through, and I just I remember it pretty vividly. It was a snowy day in January, and the licensure was due by March. So it was at the end of January. So I was really down to the 11th hour. I mean, I didn't even have a property. I mean, you had to have a full site plan, engineering work, architectural drawings, meet with the neighborhood association. I didn't have any of that. You know, I didn't even have a property under contract, literally about 45 days to go. And I was just like, you know what, I'm not going to give up, you know? So I went down this stretch here on West Wealthy, and I just went up to every door and I just knocked on it. And a couple people came to the door and a couple people didn't. But the people that did come to the door, I said, look, you know, and I just wrote a number down on a piece of paper. And I was like, I'll give you this amount of money for your house. And they just kind of looked at me and just like, you know what, you're just crazy. And I wrote down my phone number. I was like, give me a call. You know, I'd like to talk to you seriously about your house. And I left. And then like about a week later, one of the people called me.
Hey, you know, I got your note, and I think it might be time for us to sell this house.
I said, sure, let's talk about it. And it was kind of a crazy stretch from there. It was about a 30-day courting period where it was really touch and go on the communication. They didn't want to answer the phone. They didn't want to meet. And I was running out of time. You know, I was running out of time. So I didn't have the time. So I still plowed ahead on the engineering. You know, I was burning thousands and thousands of dollars on, you know, queuing up an engineer to draw up a site plan, queuing up an architect to do architectural drawings, going to the neighborhood association saying, hey, I got this property, you know, or this is where I'm going to do business. I didn't even have it under contract, you know, technically. But I was in, you know, good faith negotiations with this guy. And it was really down to the wire. It was February 22nd. It was February 22nd, and he just wasn't answering his phone, you know, for about like 2-3 week period after he had said that he would sell me the house. You know, I was like, oh man, you
Doesn't
know,
inspire
like
much confidence.
Oh I know. I was super stressed about it, and I had already spent like, you know, approaching about $30,000 on professional services and fees, and it was crazy. You know, I was like, what the fuck am I doing here? You know, I'm about to just completely, you know, screw myself. So anyway, I call him up and he finally answers the phone, and he's like, yeah, I'm not gonna sell you this house, man. And I was just like, what? You know, like there's no way. I was like, dude, just like just don't, you know. And he just like hung up the phone. So I went downstairs and I had some cash from being a carrier. I just grabbed as much cash as I could. I grabbed my wife. We had a, you know, baby at the time. She was about 2 years old, and we got in the car. I went to the corner store. I grabbed a 6-pack of beer, and I showed up on the dude's doorstep, you know, and I like knocked on the door, and I was like, hey man, like we got to talk, you know, and I just pulled all the money out of my pocket and just was like, look, dude, like I want to buy this house from you. And he's like, come inside, you know, come inside. And came in there with my wife and my kid and like 6-pack of Budweiser, busted open the 6-pack. And my wife's a licensed realtor. And we, you know, I threw down the money on the table and we signed the paperwork right there. And I believe it was February 22nd. And it was, you know, about 20 to 30 days before the full application was due to the city. And it was crazy. It was literally one of the craziest days. I'll never forget it. You know, we drank the 6-pack like
lost
within
a lot
30
of sleep in those couple of weeks, man.
Drank the 6-pack in like 20 minutes, signed the paperwork, left with the contract because you needed that contract. You know, you needed to show that you had a property under contract. But all of that, man, it gets back to your question that, you know, it was complete shithouse luck. Like it was lucky that somebody answered the door. It was lucky that the property was semi-affordable. It was lucky as hell that he came to the door and we ended up working out a deal. It was all those things combined that made it unique and made it the only possible property, I believe, in Grand Rapids that could have been possible for somebody like me or a local or somebody who didn't have $1 million slush fund that could go down 28th Street and say, oh yeah, you know, here's this traditional strip mall building that they want $2, $3, $4 million for, and I'm going to put down a $100,000 deposit on it. You know, I mean, like I don't have any shame in saying it, but like I bought Pharmhouse Wellness for $125,000, you know? I don't think anybody in Grand Rapids got into the cannabis industry for that amount of money, you know, but there was zero way I could have done it had it not been for the
Just
property that it was.
This, that, and the other thing lining up the way that it did.
So I think that, you know, to answer your question, that's the reason why a lot of folks weren't able to get in is simply the real estate is such a challenge.
Has that proven to be a big draw? I mean, I know that was the reason I was like, I want to check this place out. Just the idea that it was putting money back into, you know, Grand Rapids, essentially. Not just the people that it hires, but everything about it. That I'm not going to send money to, you know, because you get like, trying to remember the guy's name. He used to be the Speaker of the House, and he was Mr. We know cannabis, and nobody that smokes cannabis is a good person. And now he is like the CEO of one of those companies out in Colorado. It's just, I don't know. I'd rather keep it local and kind of know where it's going and be able to say, who's in charge around here? And they'll be like, oh, he's in the back room, instead of like, oh, he's in his office in some other town, you know? So is that, sorry, that's a really long way to ask that question, but do you find that people are like, hey man, I wanted to go to the local place?
We do. We get people that come through that want to support us because we're locally owned, and we are, you know, I'm the 100% owner of Pharmhouse Wellness. There's no, you know, veil or like boardroom of people behind me or people that own the real estate or fragmented owners or out of town owners. It's just me, man. It's just a one-man show. We've got a bunch of people that are from Grand Rapids working in our shop. I'm from Grand Rapids. One of them
one time saw me when I pulled up to the curbside, and they're like, hey man, were you at Meyer last night? And I was like, yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, it is cool. It's cool. We get people say that all the time, and I'm very involved. I'm here every day just about, and especially in the beginning, really bootstrapping it to get this thing off the ground, you know? And
well, and not just that too. I don't want to downplay the community involvement of things here too either, but like the house looks very nice. I'm guessing it didn't look like that when you bought it.
No, it was actually like semi-condemned. You know, they were 3 years past due on the real estate taxes. It had multiple thousands of dollars of citations and violations on it for just being non-kept and zoning violations and stuff. So
that's fun.
So we came in, and I think we really slapped some lipstick on the pig, and I think it definitely is an improvement. You know, I mean, it's still a home that was built in 1890. It's hella old and rickety, but we brought it up to commercial code and did all the things to make it look pretty. And so, yeah, I think
that looks nice. The area in the back looks nice. The fence is painted there.
Thanks, man.
And I don't know if that mural was down there before, but it just seems like this whole little area right now, just from a curbside appeal, you know, if you were walking down, you'd be like, man, this is a pretty, you know, attractive neighborhood block. Do people within the community seem pretty happy to have you guys here? Or do they say like, hey, thanks for planting these trees around here. Thanks for doing this and that to kind of, like you said, put some lipstick on the place?
I think so. I think that we've been really engaged with the neighborhood and the residents in this area. And
I saw right around the holidays, it looked like you guys had grocery bags out in the back too. Was that you guys?
We did a turkey giveaway. We gave 100 turkeys away for Thanksgiving, and that's a really big part of what I want Pharmhouse to be. We want to do is,
you don't want to just take the community's money, but you want to put something back too.
Absolutely. And I really have high hopes for this stretch, but a lot of the work that we're doing is thanks to an urban planner that I met along the way. Her name's Lene Wells, and she owns a planning firm, and she was the person that helped me with our presentation. We first met at a neighborhood association, and she was one of the first people that helped me along the way as a professional. and I'll never forget it, but we've been doing business ever since. And it was really, I knew that I was out of my league as far as community engagement and planning and urban development and all that stuff. And it's
somebody who does something that you do. It's good to hear that you've got a control on your ego to say there are some things that are just over my head, because I think in any creative venture, but especially something that involves this many other people, you have to be able to know when you can, not just can, but need to rely on somebody else for their knowledge or whatever that they've got that you don't have.
For sure. No, and I knew that the first time that I met her, that she was super well versed at community engagement and really good with city officials and all the things that I don't really pride myself in being an expert at. So that was a really big key to making this whole business and this venture possible. But since then, we've been able to continue doing business together. And one of the things that she's been really instrumental in is spearheading the development and the community engagement here on West Wealthy, through the tree planting, through the artist call that we were able to commission like 7 different works of art along West Wealthy. We're doing some streetscape enhancements this spring at Front and Wealthy. That intersection really needs a lot of love. We want to make it more mobile, accessible to people. And we really just want this area to be nicer than it was before Pharmhouse Wellness came in. And I think we're already seeing signs of that, as you noted, just some of the paintings that we have up, some of the local works of art, the trees. These are all parts of, like, I mean, I've heard her say this before, but the broken window theory, like if you drive down a street and you see broken windows, you believe that nobody's really taking care of their property, and it leads to potentially further neglect in that area. But when you see somebody who's putting love and attention back into public and private spaces like this, I think it creates a little bit of momentum for other community partners to take note and to see that, hey, this person cares about what they're doing here, and maybe we want to join in on that. So that's really the work that Lene and I are doing together, and I'm really stoked on it. I'm super excited for the future of it, because I do think that there's just endless community engagement projects that you can do, and I'm really excited to spearhead some of those with her, going down the road. But yeah, we've got some other fun projects planned for this spring. And so we're just getting started, man. This is, but it takes a commitment from the business owner to be able to reinvest funds back into the neighborhood, and also to remain committed to engagement with the local residents and community partners, whether that's a business owner or your ward commissioner or the city commission or the neighborhood association. All those things, it's all part of the puzzle, and it's all part of the ethos of Pharmhouse and trying to give back.
That's awesome. Just based on the time here, we'll start moving towards a close on this. But one of the things that I wanted to ask you about, from talking to the few people I know in the industry, it seems like kind of the vision that a lot of places have moving forward, dispensaries, I mean, is that they want to have like their own signature lines, signature strains. And so people that are, going out winning awards for the strains that they're creating are being approached by different places saying like, hey, we kind of want to have a place where, we'll have all this, but this is the only place where you can get the Farmhouse Maui Wowie, or, whatever it is. Is that something that you guys are thinking about with the grow, having stuff that's like only right here, or are you guys growing stuff that are, longtime favorites, a little of both? What's going on there?
Yeah, for sure, man. I'm super pumped about the grow. I'd love to, if you're curious, we can walk over there and show you. We're at like the 5-yard line, man. It's been about a 2-3 year project. So I'm really excited to get that facility.
Yeah, because for people
open.
Who don't know, just to grow one plant from the time you drop a seed, hypothetically, and you don't do all the other things like taking cuts to it, you just drop a seed and then you have flowers that you can cut. It takes months, not just weeks, but trying to think, what, maybe 14 to 16 weeks for, depending on the type of plant, full cycle?
It can, yeah, 12 to 15 weeks, depending on how long the plants are in their immature stage. And generally plants take 60 to 70 days to flower. And then if you're growing from seed, absolutely, yeah, 12 to 14 weeks. It can take a while, but this building's just been on ice, man, just in construction and vacant for the last 3 years. So we're super excited to get it going, super excited to get it generating, something, a product. And I really do want to be able to provide some of the nostalgic strains that you see and that are consistently asked for, the diesels or the Gorilla Glues or the Jack Herrera or, Strawberry Cough or whatever, that there is a certain amount of demand for those products, but those are also accessible out in the marketplace. So we're able to go out and get those from other growers or other processors. I really want to have products here that are super unique to Farmhouse only. Yeah. One of the big things that makes us unique is having, proprietary products. And at the end of the day, cannabis shops are relatively all the same. I mean, you can go to get a vape cart from here. You can go down the street and get that same vape cart for, plus or minus $5. And it comes down to, who you want to support, and hopefully they have some unique products and good customer service. But the grow, just over the last, really heavily over the last 5 years, I've been collecting seeds and paying a decent, pretty penny for different genetics. So I've got what I think is a really nice stash of proprietary genetics that are bred by some of the more reputable breeders in the industry. And I'm really excited to pop those from seed, explore the treasure chest of genetics that's in there, have proprietary products for Pharmhouse Wellness, and I will not sell it to any other store in Grand Rapids. So if you're interested in getting, something that's unique, locally grown, craft grown, come check us out. We hope it's, operational in the next 1 to 3 months or so. Just a tremendous amount of paperwork and red tape to get it open, but we're almost there, man. And I think that that'll really help us, by having some stuff that the next guy down the street doesn't have. And that's also grown with a ton of love and intention.
Yeah. And that's the big thing too, because people are already paying a pretty good chunk of money compared to what you could grow it for yourself, but you're paying for somebody putting in those weeks of time to grow it, find the best ones, clone those, but yada, 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 yada. But on top of just that, well, no, I guess that's most of it right there. But I don't know. Go ahead.
No, Sorry. You're straight, man. No,
it'll come to me in a second.
No, so I'm really excited to be able to have some unique strains that are unique to Farmhouse. We're not going to sell them outside of Grand Rapids. And then what I think is really going to set us apart is that I'm really not interested in selling our product for a high price. Like, I really want it to be as accessible and as affordable as possible to the consumer so that they can experience quality cannabis without having to take it through the nose, man.
There you go. Because, I mean, depending on where you go, and I'm not going to say anything about anybody, what they charge, because like we're talking about, what I think where I got lost in the details was it takes a long time to grow cannabis, period. But to find really good and to grow it the right way, make sure that everything is where it's supposed to be, all steps along the way, takes a lot of work. So it's worth paying a little bit more for. But if you can lower your overhead growing your own, but also control all the things in the quality department, because, if you ask not just people that work here, but anywhere, hey, tell me about how they grow that. Do you know if it was grown indoors or outdoors? Probably outdoor. I'm not really sure. You know what I mean? So you don't know if it was grown organically, what kind of things they were putting into it, if it was grown indoors or outdoors. Some people have a preference. Some people are like, I don't want any bird poop in my weed. But I'll still smoke it if it was grown outdoors. But yeah, I don't know. Just to know and to be able to answer some questions about where does it come from knowledgeably, I think would be very attractive to me as a consumer anyway.
Absolutely. And Farmhouse is just a small locally owned shop. We do have a relatively low amount of overhead, I think, compared to other operations. And then the fact that I was a caregiver and was a grower will be a tremendous benefit.
Before you were in the business side of it, like that's you come from the spirit of the people that kept the cannabis culture alive even when all the forces were flowing against it.
Yeah, so I won't have to go out and hire a head grower, and that'll just, again, be able to keep our cost low. And
those guys, man, those guys are like French trained sommeliers. You get a good one, yeah.
They can be a unique bunch, the growers, for sure. But so I won't have to, thankfully, have to go out and at least right out of the gate hire a super expensive head grower, and that'll be able to just keep our costs down. And we plan to pass those cost savings on to the customer or patient, through low prices at the retail side with quality cannabis that I think it's that combination of factors that'll be unrivaled in Grand Rapids. And I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, man. Well, that's awesome. I can't wait to see what you guys have got going on, and I'm sure everyone else will too. So thank you for coming on. We'll do follow-ups in the future too, just to maybe check in with you on the phone for 15 minutes when everything is fully operational and you can give everybody a shout, let them know where to get it again. But yeah, man, thanks for coming on the show. Let me hang out in your space here.
Yeah, dude. Thank you so much for the invite and coming and checking us out, man, and supporting the shop along the way. I really appreciate it. Seeing you out there, and it's always a pleasure, man. See you. So thank you again for coming through.
All right, everybody. That was Casey Kornoelje, founder, owner, and general manager of the only locally owned and operated dispensary in Grand Rapids, Pharmhouse Wellness. Check those guys out. Look in the show notes for their website, all the places on social media where you can hit them up, and the address. And for God's sake, if you're going to smoke cannabis, get it from Pharmhouse. Why not? All right, folks, thanks for listening. Check us out on social media, and I'll see you next time. Mwah.
Yeah, man. Weird, right?